Hey everyone, we're live. Welcome, welcome.
Hi, my name is Tiffany. I'm from Makeup and Monarchies.
And I'm Henry from Medieval Chronicles 1066. So all of you who bitch and say that you don't like not seeing my face, you get to see my ugly face today. And this is my cat, Cleopatra. She says hi. Okay, Tiffany, take it away.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Hundred Years' War that took place in the 14th century into the 15th century. And this was, and also how it relates to Game of Thrones. So the Hundred Years' War started in 1337, and it actually lasted for 116 years. It was a conflict between England and France, and also in this time was a civil war within France. It started when there was feudal disputes over the Duchy of Aquitaine, as well as the claim to the French throne from Edward III. So during the war, we see 5 generations of kings from rival dynasties fought for the throne of France. At the time, France was the dominant kingdom in Western Europe. This war had an effect on European history that lasted and evolved the military. Both sides made innovation in military technologies and tactics. This included professional standing armies and artillery, and this permanently changed European warfare. It was during this conflict that chivalry, which is a code of conduct between knights, reached its height and then its decline. The term Hundred Years' War is usually divided into 3 phases. So we had the Edwardian War, which was between 1337 and 1360, the Caroline War, and that was 1369 through 1389, and then we have the Lancastrian War, that is between 1415 and 1453. Both countries brought in allies, and the English forces initially came out ahead, but the French forces under the House of Valois retained control over the Kingdom of France.
You might want to mute and unmute your mic because it's going bub. Sounds like someone's I know you're not burping, but that's what it sounds like. So.
No. My AirPods are not working for me today, so hold on.
Okay,
I'm going to plug my
clear that stuff.
Plug my mic in.
Yeah, plug your mic in. We got I got a nice little chart here, a family chart of the monarchs with the 100 years of war. See if we can pull this up. There's That's it. Now you're good.
Okay, good. Technology, it's a bitch.
Yep.
All right. So Edward III struggles to raise money for the invasion, so he had to delay it until 1340. It was then that he formally declared himself King of France. This was the year the first major battle of this era happened. The Battle of Slough involved England seizing merchant ships and getting them ready for war. I'm going to just back up a little bit and explain why Edward was claiming the throne or had a claim to the throne. So it was through his mother, Isabella of France, who had married Edward II. And if anybody has seen the movie Braveheart, even though it's not historically accurate in any sense of anything, they did marry, they did have children. So her father was King of France. So that's where Edward gets his claim. So I'm going to get into it in a little bit as to why he starts this, but That's how we get to this war. Where now I lost where it was. So he was getting these merchant ships ready for war. They sailed to France and destroyed the French fleet. And war is expensive, and neither side could afford it. A truce was declared, and that truce did not last long. In 1341, the death of the Duke of Brittany riled things up again. Brittany was semi-independent to France, and both England and France backed rival claimants to that duchy. Edward landed there in 42. So when I'm saying these numbers, I'm in the 1300s, so 1342, and took this land before another truce was signed. The following year, negotiations towards a permanent peace treaty between the two broke down. This was mostly because Edward didn't want peace in 45. The war continued on, but England wasn't really successful besides a few victories. In 46, Edward took a large army and landed in Normandy. His advance wasn't meant for the capture and hold of the land. It was meant I'm not great at French, so chevauchée. And that is when an invading army basically sets fire to everything. Edward then moved north before King Philip's larger army caught up to him. However, both armies met up, and so we have the Battle of Crecy. This was a victory for England and a decisive one. Many French nobles and the King of Bohemia were killed by the English and Welsh longbowmen. After this, Edward went north and laid siege to Calais, and it was captured the next year. Calais was a really important gain for Edward. It provided a gateway into France, as it was the shortest crossing point from England, and would make future campaigns cheaper, not having to sail that far. And spoiler alert, England held Calais until the late 1550s, and it was taken back under Henry II, and then it went back to the French. England's luck wasn't limited to France, though. The King of Scotland, who'd been at war with England since 1332, was captured by the Archbishop of York in the Battle of Neville's Cross, which was right outside of Durham. Victory celebrations would be short-lived because the introduction of the Black Death came in 1348. This, wrought by the pace, meant that no big military campaigns could be taken by both sides for years that followed. I think we all lived something similar to that. Probably not as bad, but I get it. In 1350, King Philippe died and was succeeded by his son John. There was some small skirmishes, but both sides still could not agree on peace, nor Edward owing homage. In 55, Edward the Black Prince started a devastating chevauchée on French lands. John confronted him, and along with his large army, we see the Battle of Poitiers in 56. This is one of the most famous English victories in history. This is mainly because the French king was captured, and this was a big bonus for England. The ransom demand was 3 million crowns, and I don't have my calculator that I calculate what the translations are to that for now, but that is a lot of money. A civil war in France soon followed this and caused the ransom to go unpaid. However, the Treaty of Breton in
It's just
60,
funny. It's funny. These people beat each other up, and whoever's left, they extort money out of them, and they don't pay it, and they sign peace treaties, and then they attack each other again. It's go ahead. I just gotta laugh. Right?
um, so this saw in 60, it saw a peace agreement or saw an agreement between England and France, and this was the end of the first phase of war. The treaty gave Edward more land in France, and he dropped his claim to the French throne. John's ransom amount was lowered, but he was never released, and he died in London in 64. Charles V succeeded John, his father, on the throne of France. And in 69, peace was broken when Charles called the Black Prince, who had now been given the title Duke of Aquitaine, to Paris, and he refused to go. So war broke out again. France had an early victory in 70 at Pantheon. After this, Edward the Black Prince became sick and went back to England in 72. So we are now into the Caroline era of the war. The English territories in France were reduced by 76 in the year of 76, not the number. It was also in this year that Edward the Black Prince dies, followed by the death of his father, Edward III. The throne was passed to the Black Prince's son, Richard. Then we get Richard II, who was 10 when he took the throne. A few years later, Charles V dies, and he was succeeded by his son, Charles VI. Or, I'm sorry, Charles V dies, and then he's succeeded by Charles VI. Charles was only 11. Now, England and France both had boy kings ruling.
There's your boy, the Black Prince.
In England, John, what?
I said there's an artistic rendering of your boy, the Black Prince, because he was called Black Prince because he wore black armor, right?
I forget why. I don't remember. I've not done my deep dive into this time frame yet. I thought it was something else.
Black Prince.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember what it was, but he's not one that lives rent free in my head. Joan of Gaunt lives rent free in my head.
Edward of Woodstock, 15 June 1330 to 8 June 1376, known to history as the Black Prince,
Yep.
was the eldest son and heir apparent to King Edward III of England. How would you think Charles III, our current king over there in Great Britain, where would he be on the horse, or would he be hiding in the tent in the back behind the lines? I'm just look, we gotta. You can't take all this stuff too seriously or go crazy. But I'm sorry, go ahead. Why was he black? What was he called black, man?
I don't remember why. So in England, John of Gaunt was the stabilizing force behind Richard II. John was an accomplished general and had married, in his second marriage, the daughter of the King of Castile. Her name was Constance of Castile. And it was through this marriage that he claimed the throne of Castile for himself in 81. Portugal backed this claim and made an alliance with England in 73. This was confirmed to be the Treaty of Windsor. It was this treaty that is still in effect today, and it is the oldest active treaty in the world. I find this absolutely fascinating, and I love that it's still there. John was not successful in getting the Castilian throne and was back in England by 89. Both political division and financial pressure of war forced Richard II to make peace with France. This lasted the rest of his reign. Richard was not the best king of England. I wouldn't say the worst, just not the best. he had constant issues with his surrounding nobility.
Was this Edward II we're talking now?
Nope, this is Richard II.
Oh, Richard, excuse me, Richard II. Yeah, they didn't like him at all.
I think he was dealt a crappy hand, but he was stripped of significant power. France had their own issues with their king, Charles VI. He had bouts of madness, and so a regency was established. And this led to a peer struggle between the Duke of Burgundy and the Duke of Orleans. In England, back to England, Richard regained some of his power and had John of Gaunt's oldest son, Henry Bolingbroke, exiled in 98.
Right.
So Henry Bolingbroke is John's oldest son from his first marriage to Blanche of Lancaster. So John dies the following year in 99. Richard has Henry disinherited, and Henry ends up returning to England to reclaim his lands. Most of the English nobles sided with him, and Richard was overthrown. Henry became Henry IV and was the first monarch from the House of Lancaster. Not much went on between the two countries during Henry's reign. He died in 1413, and his son Henry of Monmouth succeeded him as Henry V.
Right.
Richard ends up dying while he was still a prisoner. It's thought by most historians that he was starved to death. So Henry V was willing to make peace with France as long as they gave him land. They refused. And so Henry went to war in 1415. He landed in Normandy, seizing Harfleur, and then moving to Calais. He was cut off by the French army, and thus the Battle of Agincourt. This is known as one of England's greatest military victories. Henry was outnumbered, but he had 80% longbowmen. The French suffered a massive casualty loss, and the French nobility was devastated by the deaths, and a lot of officers were imprisoned. Henry sails back to England with the hostages and then returned to France 2 years later to conquer the entire country and have himself crowned as King of France, who was still having civil issues. England captured most of Normandy except for Rouen, which fell in 1419. That same year, the Duke of Burgundy was assassinated on the orders of the French heir, the Dauphin. I'm pretty sure that was Louis, who came to be Louis the 11th. Burgundy's successor, Philippe, sided with England and declared his support for Henry as the King of France, along with many other French nobles. In 1420, the Treaty of Troyes was made and stated that Henry was to be the regent and heir to the French throne. Charles's children would be disinherited, and Henry was to marry one of Charles's daughters, Catherine of Valois. They had one son together in 1421, another Henry, who becomes Henry VI eventually, and this happened before Henry died, the fifth. Henry's claim wasn't accepted well from a lot of France, but back in England, the challenge of the Southampton plot rose, and this saw several nobles attempt to overthrow him and replace him with Edmund Mortimer, a cousin to Richard II, through Edward III's son, Lionel of Antwerp's daughter, Philippa. So Edmund Mortimer was the son of Philippa, who was the daughter of Lionel of Antwerp. So that's that line. This plot was almost destined to fail because Edmund didn't even want the throne to start with. Henry was making big efforts to increase the use of the English language in government. Another issue was the religious movement. Just like the church is a religious institution, Henry saw holidays as a threat to stability, and so he started burning protesters alive. He returned to France in 1421, and it was there that he died in 1422. Charles VI followed his death 2 months later. In 1428, in an attempt to crush dissenters, England laid siege to Orleans, but the defenders were relieved the following year by an army. This army was led partially by Joan of Arc. England was defeated at the Battle of Patay. A large number of French nobles switched allegiances to the Dauphin, who was soon after crowned King Charles the Sixth. I'm sorry, the Seventh.
Dauphin is the French name or term for the
Prince.
English equivalent of the Prince of Wales.
Yep, there. In 1430, Joan of Arc was captured by the Burgundian army and was handed over to the English. She was tried as a heretic and was burned at the stake in 1435. The Pope tried to end the war, but both sides refused. During negotiations, the now Duke of Burgundy, or the then Duke of Burgundy, the new one, made up with Charles VII. England's most important ally deserted them and made France more powerful. Burgundy really went back and forth between France and England, and I think that was really whoever could help them out the most. France recovered and recaptured large waves of land in 44. A truce that was supposed to last until 1450 was signed in 44. England broke the truce in 49 by launching a military action in Brittany. This gave the French the excuse to retake Normandy and after crush the last of the English army in the Battle of Formigny. All that England had left was Gascony and Calais. Gascony was lost in 53 when the English army lost the Battle of Castillon. This is the unofficial end of the 100 Years' War. However, it wasn't officially over until 75 when Edward IV and Louis XI signed the Treaty of Picquigny. And the French and English monarchs thereafter remained separate despite the monarchs of England styling themselves as sovereigns of France until 1802. So this did go on a long while. And probably one of the most turbulent times to live in the country.
Can you imagine being in college or graduate school or even in high school and having a quiz on this family tree? I mean, how would you? I mean, let's take a look at this for a minute. So these are all Plantagenets until you get to, well, even the House of Lancaster were descended from Plantagenets, right? And the last Plantagenet king was Richard III, right? Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. So go ahead. Comment on this. See if you can figure this out. Go
yes
ahead.
and no. I mean, yes. But I would say that would be, I mean, if we go the line, I would say it would be Edward VI. But then you've got Elizabeth, well, the last king. I mean, the last Plantagenet to live was Margaret Pole, who was the daughter
Henry
of
VIII had her head cut off. She was an old lady, right?
yeah.
Yeah, she's
So
like 70 years old and they had to hack her head off 3 or 4
I
times,
think
and they missed. These people, I'm sorry.
um,
These people were crazy. We were crazy. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
everybody did it though. It was how the world was.
Oh my God. They
I
all married
just
their cousins and all that, and then we get the Pope to. They probably bribed the Pope, and he'd write a thing saying it's okay. You have a dispensation, or you're allowed to marry your first cousin. And these look, people, you got to understand something. This is why you had revolts, and you ended up getting. This is still feudalism. Am I correct with all this here? I mean,
um
technically speaking, as far as the lands and who owns what
a
and who
lot of
owns.
it was a lot of it was feudal. But I mean they would
Jesus.
the way that they would marry to keep the bloodline pure. You couldn't have like I mean Edward the Fourth did it, but
They don't have
you couldn't
mistresses.
have higher up marrying commoners really, or like people that were workers. So they had
So
to.
is it correct to say the reason why, one of the reasons, probably there's multiple reasons, but one of the main reasons, because to protect the property, because they don't want this going out here or out the other way if they marry someone outside this bloodline, because that's how property is descended and all that, and the rulers, legitimacy and all that stuff. That's a big part of it. Am I correct?
Yeah, but I also think too money, not only the land but the money. I mean, if you had, I'm just gonna throw a name out there. If you had John of Gaunt, had a daughter, he's not gonna marry that daughter off to somebody that couldn't give him enough, the proper amount of money that would come from a marriage of a descendant of a king.
So if you're a woman and your father says you're getting married to some dude
Mhm.
over in Flanders or France, but I don't want to go there, tough turds, chew harder, you're going. That's what this was, right? They didn't have any, women didn't have a say in any of this, did they?
No, no.
Wow. I mean, I'm no feminist, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying these people were something else, man. Look at this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's
Just
fine.
just reacting to this. That's why people got fed up with this crap, and that's eventually this got done away with through history. But Plantagenet.
It
So if we
didn't.
go back to this, where's this
It
map?
didn't.
I mean, okay, right here. These people were all basically descended from either the Normans, who were Norman Viking racially, but they were French culturally. That's not gross
Normans were
oversimplification.
no, the Normans were English. That was an English territory.
Right, but as far as like their DNA, they were basically Vikings.
I don't. I
I
don't know.
think, yeah, and they
Go
settled here
back
and
to
they had
that.
duchies or dukedoms, whatever you want, whatever the proper term is. And this was
That-
all a patchwork of different. And then what happened was you have William the Conqueror comes over in 1066. He takes the throne through conquest, and then you get all these bloodlines. The House of Normandy ends with the last son of William the Conqueror, and then when Henry II becomes king after Stephen and Matilda, they cut a deal. Stephen was king for life; he didn't have any issue. And then his mother, what's his mother? Matilda was the mother of Henry II.
He did have kids. He did have kids.
They didn't survive though.
Stephen did.
Henry the
I think
First.
no. Henry the First had Matilda, and then had a son. His name is escaping me right now. He died in the White Ship disaster.
Right.
He had 18 or 20 illegitimate children, and a
Wow.
lot of them were on that ship with the legitimate heir.
Wow.
So then it left only Matilda. So then however it happens that Stephen gets the throne, which is absolute garbage in my opinion.
Well, they didn't want a woman. They didn't want to pass it through the female line.
It was supposed to.
Right.
It was supposed to. And then Stephen came in and was like, no.
Took it.
He told me he wanted me, which Which, whatever. But
Matilda fought him, and it went back and forth called the Anarchy. And then they cut a deal. Stephen, you could be king for life, but my son Henry II will
and that's
be
how
king.
that happened. Yep,
And that's
he
the
would
House
be
of
his heir.
Plantagenet. Right. Okay.
And that comes the Plantagenet name comes from him through his father Geoffrey.
Anjou, right? But they called them. They wore a sprig of some kind of flower, not a flower, but a plant in your cap, and that's what Plantagenet means, right?
Quite
So,
possibly. I haven't gotten into that part.
this is how do people keep this stuff straight? I mean, even the English, who are
Who's-
professional historians, I listen to them on YouTube. They don't. I don't know, man. I mean, so it just
You
is
read
hard
it so much, and I can. I mean, I'm not 100% on it, but I know a lot of it. But you read it so much, you see it so much, it just becomes ingrained in your brain. Is that Edwards?
This is
Is that-
Edward III Plantagenet here,
Mhm.
and he's Philippa of Hainault. Is that from she from
Hainault.
France, or was she from Saxony?
Yep.
Okay. They get married, and they have here's the children: Edmund of Langley, Edward the Prince of Wales, the Black Prince. Who else do we have? Jeez,
Well,
okay.
it's
John of
Edward.
Gaunt. Yeah.
It's Edward the Black Prince, and then Lionel of Antwerp, John of Gaunt, Edmund of Langley, and then Thomas of Woodstock. Those were the sons.
Who's Edward the Third's son? Is it who comes in after him?
After
Oh,
Edward the
it's his grandson. It's Richard the Second, because this dude here dies. The oldest, the Prince of Edward the Black Prince dies, and his preference is to go through the male line. So Richard the Second was the son of which of these?
Edward the Black Prince, the first son.
Okay, so he wanted to keep it through the first. So this dude's gone. And I'm going to say, this is just me. Don't listen. This is not ascribing my views to my co-host. These people had to have knocked each other off. They die all of a sudden, and there's no explanation. So this dude here, Edward, Prince of Wales, the Black Prince, dies, but he has a son. Excuse me, Richard II. So this would be the grandson of Edward III. He becomes king when he's like 10 years old, 12 years old, something like that.
10.
Okay. All right. And he was a no good SOB according to some of the sources. Okay, go ahead. I keep my mouth shut. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around this stuff so I understand who's who and you know how this. Okay, go ahead.
No, you're good.
No, I just wanted it. It helps me. Sometimes I'm what's it called, an audio learner.
I was actually trying to see the girls because they did have daughters. Edward III. Yeah, Isabella, Countess of Bedford, Joan, which I think she died really young as a baby. He had quite a few children. If I'm trying to think back to my on this day, but September of a specific year, he had like 3 children die like within days of each other. So I think they probably had the Black Death, or it was the Black Death that they died of. It's the only thing I can think of. But they had Joan, then Lionel, John, Edmund, Mary, Margaret. Mary was the Duchess of Brittany. So she married during the war, during the 100 Years' War. Margaret, Countess of Pembroke. So there were a lot of children, like a lot. I know quite a few did not make it long. Like I said, they died very young. There was one that was William of Windsor. He died at like 2 weeks old.
Okay, so just to simplify things, Edward III Plantagenet.
Yep.
He has, was it 5 sons, right?
That survived, yeah.
Okay, and the firstborn, according to this, is Edward, Prince of Wales, the Black Prince. That's the line that Edward III wants to pass it through, But his eldest son, the Black Prince, dies before Edward III, the king, dies. So he wants his grandson, the son of the Black Prince, to become king after him.
Yeah, it's not even a want. That's just a line of succession. It's the same now. So God, God forbid something happened to William, the crown would then go to George. It wouldn't go sons. So if say Edward never had Richard, it would then have gone to John because Lionel only had his daughter, so it wouldn't have gone that way.
Okay, right here.
So then it would have gone to John, and then John, then Henry, and then say they didn't have any kids after Henry and they were both gone, then it jumps over to Edmund. And then Edmund's boy.
Right. And then the other piece we need to keep in our mind is these two cadet branch. So this is the main branch here. If he would have had a son, Richard II, his son would have been the heir to the throne, but he did not.
Yep.
Okay. And so what he does is he picks a fight with his uncle, who is his cousin, excuse me, Henry IV, Bolingbroke. Okay. And he is the son of Joan of Arc. So there's the House of Lancaster, was one of the 5 sons of Edward III Plantagenet, Joan of Arc, right? That's the Lancastrian line. And then you have the Yorkist line, which is, I'm trying to find it. Edmund of Langley.
Yep.
It goes through the female. There it is, right there.
No, it goes through the male.
Oops, sorry. Okay, Isabel of Castile, Edmund of Langley. They have Edward, Duke of York.
Yep.
And then you've got all the Yorkists on this side. So these people are cousins, first cousins, yeah. And this guy here, Richard, decides he wants to pick Richard was a cruel, unjust ruler, according to the history books, right? And what he did is to take this guy out of the running because he didn't want any competitors. Now, had he had a direct son who was surviving, maybe he wouldn't have picked a fight and taken Bolingbroke's property and disinherited him, right? Maybe, we don't know. But anyway, he takes this guy here, his property, attains him, kicks him out, exiles him for 10 years. And he didn't take his property, exiled for 10 years. And then when he was in exile, he says, you know what, I'm going to take all your property and attaint you, which means, by the way, we don't have bills of attainder because our Constitution permits. Look, people, I'm just talking here. This is, the Americans dealt with this when we were colonists. We said, this is bullshit. We're putting an X through this. We're not dealing with this anymore. Okay? With all your privilege and your bloodline. So you get out of our country. And anyway, okay, I'm just saying. So Bolingbroke says, you know what? You took all my land. You took my name. And you exiled me for like I'm coming back. He lands. And he shows up with a bunch of people who said, yeah, this is BS here, Richard II. You're cruel. And they force him off the throne. He gets stuck in a tower, or as the English like to say, banged up in the tower, chained to the wall, no food or drink, and he dies in 2 months. Is that basically the outline there? With this?
That's
this guy. These ones are anointed kings according to their coronation ceremony. Priest king. Edward III, Richard II. This guy is not an anointed. They called him a usurper.
Who? Henry?
Henry IV. Because he was not an anointed king. Richard II Plantagenet was, right? And I guess people at the time, I don't know if they were split down the middle, but you had factions. Even though he was horrible, he was an anointed king. There was people that grudgingly supported him, but then everybody else was getting screwed. And they said, well, go for it. And Parliament made him king, but then he became anointed afterwards. But these are cadet branches, right? The House of Lancaster, and then this House of York, which means that these lines were from other brothers, not the firstborn primogeniture. So that was the problem. So then once Plantagenet, Henry IV Plantagenet, Bolingbroke, takes the throne through deposing him, it's wide open. Right, we're not going through the first line. This dude doesn't. I'm just talking. This guy does not have a legitimate male offspring, so that opens all this up to a competition. All right here, right? Okay, go ahead.
No, Lionel doesn't because he has a daughter and he dies before this all happens, anyways. Um, so I mean, he's by the time this happens, he's gone for 30. He had been gone for 30 years. So that's why when this happens, it's Henry Bolingbroke that does it.
And his son is the future Henry V.
Fifth, yep. And then you got that's why that era of the 100 Years' War is Lancastrian because it's them.
So the kings are in dark bold here. Okay. Wow. No wonder they killed each other like pigs. All these people competing, it's wide open. They can't see if he would have had a legitimate offspring, that would have probably tamped down a lot of this stuff. But they knocked each other off anyway. They didn't want any
No,
competition.
see, I don't know. The last time we had that happen was the Battle of Bosworth, and that was between Henry VII and Richard III. But after that, I mean, there's Charles that gets executed, but he was not playing by the right. I don't know how other to say it than not doing well.
So British people, English people, this is why you lost your empire because you intermarried. No, just kidding. That's why
No,
we control everything because we
no,
weren't this stupid. Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking.
no. Yeah, they didn't off each other after that. I mean, even then they didn't either. I mean, the only time that really happened during that time was Henry taking Richard and starving him. So I don't think they offed each other as often as people think.
Okay. This
There was
is
a
just
there was a lot of sickness at this time too. It's not obviously anywhere near what we're in now for medicine. So even down to the point that they didn't even drink water, they were drinking wine, ale, because it was all liquids that were distilled and like fermented, and so there was less amount of disease, but it still went around like crazy. I do think a lot of the unexplained deaths or no um, cause of death would more than likely be illness. And Dr. Susie Edge is a great person to follow. She has books about all the kings and what they died from, and she explains it all. She is a medical doctor, but she also loves history, so she's a great person to follow. And yeah, I think she's wonderful.
anyway. Continue, please. I didn't mean to knock you off your core. I'm
Yeah,
just
you're
like
fine.
reacting to this, and I'm like, this is bullshit, man.
I know.
I mean, no wonder these people lost out eventually and got knocked off and don't control the world anymore. And we did. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I think they do
Next.
to a degree. I mean, they're one of the superpowers, so I think it's still there.
All you need to know about the United Kingdom right now is they put a woman in jail, in prison for 2 years because she tweeted something about the stuff that's going on with these illegal immigrants murdering people. Now, that's tyranny. No freedom of speech.
No, they have
Two
freedom.
years in prison. 2 years in
I
prison
think
because she tweeted something.
no, there was other stuff to that. There was more to that. It wasn't just that. But they do have freedom of
Agitator, huh?
speech.
Troublemaker. Here you get to put it on YouTube and make money off it if you're a troublemaker. I'm just go ahead. Okay, I'm gonna mute now. Go ahead. Pick it up.
So some parallels to Westeros with this war is the ongoing battles that we see through all 8 seasons. We had the Battle of Blackwater, we had the Siege of Marine, the attack on Castle Black. Hardhome was another huge one, and probably the first gigantic one that we saw, aside from Battle of Blackwater. Then we had the Battle of the Bastards, which is a culmination of different historical battles, all kind of mushed into one. We have the Battle of Winterfell, the Long Night, Battle of Golden Road, which is the one where Daenerys comes in on a dragon and takes out Jaime's army. Battle on King Landing. And then we had the battle beyond the wall, Battle of Ice. So within the time frame of this, we see so many different battles happening, much like the 100 Years' War. And you can kind of see a parallel with Daenerys coming in like Edward III to try and take the throne of Westeros as he did to try and take the throne of France through a parent's lineage.
Right. There you go.
So we do see a lot of different parallels within the two.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's all I have.
Oh, come on, you got more than that. Give me your what are your thoughts on all this? This is not the easiest thing to master, and you're right, it just takes a lot of practice, and you go through it over and over again and everything
Yeah.
like that. But I don't know, man. It's just I mean, it doesn't surprise me why they no longer. Let me say this: it doesn't surprise me why they expanded their empire overseas. Through the ages, in modern times, India, Canada, India, Australia, New Zealand, because they were an island. I mean, England's an island, and but I guess, long story short, they all kind of had, to some degree, the same French blood, for lack of a better term, right through their veins. So they all considered themselves like they wanted all this, right? This is one of the reasons for the war. They thought that they were entitled to this. Some of the English kings.
Well, yeah, like I said in the beginning, this was due to Edward's claim through his mother, because she was the daughter of a king of France. So that's how he got hit. Like he had his claim. I find that funny though, because later his children or his grandchildren skip over a woman because supposedly she had no claims to a throne, and go to Henry Bolingbroke. So I find that a little ironic.
So when they, after they all the males killed each other in the Wars of the Roses, Henry VII becomes king. A lot of the male heirs and male line have been snuffed out through war or execution. And Henry VIII, his son, has Edward VI. He died when he was 15. They don't have anybody left but Mary and Elizabeth, right?
Right.
And so the women ended up taking over.
We had Lady Jane Grey for 9 days.
Yeah, she was a teenager, and she was a Protestant, and Edward VI wanted her. He put it in his will because he didn't want his sister Mary, the Catholic, to come back.
Yep. So Jane was actually a cousin to them. Jane was, I'm going to try and trace this back in my brain. So Jane was the daughter of Grey, whose mother was Frances Brandon, I'm going to hold off on the Grey in a second and I will get back there. You have Frances Brandon, who was daughter of Charles Brandon and his second wife, Catherine Willoughby. And then I'm sorry. Am I wrong? I think it was actually through Mary Tudor. I might be wrong on that, because that's how that line got there.
That's going to be down here. That's not in this.
Frances Brandon was probably Mary Tudor's child. But then we have the Grey line. So the Grey line was, her father was a Grey, and then his father was Thomas Grey, second Marquis of Dorset. His father was Thomas Grey, first Marquis of Dorset, whose mother was Elizabeth Woodville. So it is, I'm going to have to look that up.
Wasn't Elizabeth Woodville married to a Grey? He was an older man and he died.
So John, no, he wasn't older. He was her age. Yeah, John Gray, he died, I believe it was Towton, the Battle of Towton. But that's how Jane got on there. She was Protestant, and I do think the father pushed it a bit. But he didn't want Mary becoming queen because then she would convert the country back to Catholic, back into Catholicism. So, yep, I'm gonna look that up real quick. That's really gonna bother me. That's really gonna bug me.
This is trying to get, yeah, I'm trying to find a genealogical table. And the Mortimers were, what was it? Was it Richard which king's wife? Richard II? His wife went with Mortimer, or which am I wrong?
No. Nope. So Mortimer comes in from Lionel of Antwerp's daughter, Philippa. Before I get there, hold on. It was Charles Brandon. Mary Tudor had Frances Brandon, and then she married Henry Grey, first Duke of Suffolk. So that's where that came. So they were cousins. Sorry. We have Lionel of Antwerp. So Lionel had one daughter, Philippa. She married Edmund Mortimer. So that's why they were kind of pushing him, because that would have been only, even though he wasn't a son of Lionel, he had married Philippa. So to put Edmund on the throne, that means you're going almost in order, but it should have been, in my opinion, it should have been Philippa. It should never have been Henry Bolingbroke, but that's my opinion.
Say that again, so I can wrap my head around it.
It should never have been Henry to do this. It should have been Philippa, Lionel of Antwerp's daughter, to get the throne. That's what my opinion.
So the Mortimers really had a better claim to the throne than
the only reason why the only reason he had a claim to the throne is because he married Lionel of Antwerp, his daughter Philippa. Lionel is the second surviving son into adulthood of Edward III. So then it would have gone in order. So it would have gone Edward the Black Prince, his son Richard II. Then it would have gone into Lionel, who was the second surviving son, to his daughter Philippa, over to her husband's, being the Mortimer. And this is where Richard, Duke of York's line or claim comes from as well. He is grandson to Philippa through their daughter, through Philippa and Edmund's daughter Anne. I know this gets really confusing.
This is the best I can find at the moment, but doesn't our Constitution prohibit bloodlines somehow?
I have no idea. I don't know.
But if you read, like the Bill of Rights, Congress shall have the power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. That's Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution. So if you look at the founding, Madison chiefly was the architect, although they all had input. Obviously, it was a compromised document. But if you read parts of the U.S. Constitution, they're prohibiting all this stuff. A lot of this this is Section 3, treason, Clause 1, meaning treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. So the king can't sign a piece of paper and cut your head off without a trial, because we don't have a king. But then punishment, Clause 2, the Congress shall have the power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture during the life of the person attainted. So what that means is they can't say that I don't like you, you're looking at me wrong, you're my cousin, you might challenge me for the throne, I'm attainting you. You're a traitor. I'm cutting your head off. Not only am I cutting your head off or exiling you, all your family, your whole bloodline's corrupt. We're taking all your property. See, the Constitution says we ain't doing that. Okay, thank God, because otherwise, what you'd have is everybody over in this country killing each other like pigs. I know I'm being grossly oversimplified and everything, but does that make sense to say that?
I think they did that because they didn't want what they were living in and they wanted to change it. But I mean, it's not far like the way we work here is very similar to there. It's just in a different way. If that makes sense. It's similar. Meaning
Aaron Burr was tried for treason.
Who?
Aaron Burr was tried for treason. Wow. Getting my American history back in my head. Chief Justice Marshall's ruling held that Burr, who had not been present at the assemblage on Blenhasser's Island, where the treasonous people met, I think, could be convicted of advising and procuring or levying of war only upon the testimony of 2 witnesses to have procured at the assemblage. Because the operation had been covert, such testimony was naturally unobtainable. The net effect of Marshall's pronouncement was to make it extremely difficult to convict one of levying war against the United States, short of the conduct or participation in actual hostilities. Short version is they can't cut your head off because someone signs a piece of paper doesn't like you. That's what that's about. Go ahead.
Well, that's because they didn't want like what England was doing. So
we owe an awful lot to the people who revolted and signed the deck. You know, when they signed the Declaration of Independence, they had to go into hiding because they were traitors at that point to the king in the crowd,
well,
and
yeah.
also. We owe a lot to these people. I'm telling you, we owe a lot to these people who signed that document, who drafted. God, no way had slavery. It got worked out, unfortunately, the wrong way with the Civil War, with the civil rights, old legislation. Hopefully, things are getting to where they should be if people don't think they are. But this stuff here is crazy. These family trees. See, this is
I love it.
This is a straitjacket because of feudalism and bloodlines and who owns what and all that other stuff.
This is how it works. It's a long-standing tradition. I respect it. I appreciate it. I love it. I think it's amazing. This has been going on for close to this has been going on close to 1,000 years, and I think there's something to be said for that alone.
Where would Prince Harry be in this table? Who would he be, do you think? Or even in the Game of Thrones, Prince Harry?
He's not involved in that.
He's crazy too. I don't know.
Look, I don't think he's crazy, but
I get I get it. Maybe he woke up one day and looked around and said, "Look, I don't want to deal with this no more," and he took off with what's her name? But this is people should. I hope that one of the reasons, and hopefully I'm speaking for Tiffany too, the reasons why we do this is this helps us understand where we are now. And that we don't want to repeat these mistakes. Now, there are good and bad. I agree with you. There's good features, there's bad features. But if people don't know their history, we got a problem.
I've said that for a long time. People really need to start researching the past, the things that have gone on, because there are things that have happened and are happening that can be avoided if we looked and go, whoa, we've been down this road before, it didn't work out well, let's change paths. But I do it because I love it. I love this time period. I could be transported back in time. It's exactly where I'd go. I love it. I've always loved it. There's something about it. I
agree with you, but I would think to some degree, to Americans, a lot of this stuff is repugnant. You know, we don't accept this. We're not doing this, and I'm sorry, but so King Charles III, right? King Charles, he's got William is going to be the next king if he survives Charles, and if William doesn't survive Charles, then it's the oldest boy George. He's like 12 now,
and then
Charlotte, and then Louis.
Yep.
And then if something happens to all three, then you get Prince Harry.
Yep.
Right?
And then it would go Archie, Lilibet, and then it would go, it would skip over Anne and her kids, and then it would go Andrew, and then Beatrice, Eugenie, and then Edward's son would get it after that.
Because he was the youngest.
Oh, sorry, no, it would not. It would go to, sorry. Then it would go to Beatrice's daughter, Sienna, and then she's pregnant again, so then she'll have a kid. So it just goes like, it goes to the child and then their children down that line, and then it would go over to the next child and down all that line.
If you look in most states, if you look at your statutes on descent and distribution under your state laws, meaning if someone dies without a will and they die intestate, this is the scheme here, how it goes. How it goes across and it goes down, it goes back up and stuff. But if you check that out, each state's going to have a different statute of descent and distribution. But that's where this is from.
That's how they did it. That's how they put it together.
And
a lot of our stuff is taken from theirs.
the other thing I was struck by is like there's a lot of U.S. cities and stuff that are named after English, like Durham, right? We talked about Durham today, North Carolina.
Yeah. I live in New England, so we have almost everything is that. So we have like we have Gloucester, we have Peabody, Beverly,
Towns and cities.
Boston, Ipswich, and then if you move up, so if you go up into Worcester, Leicester, Leominster, we have all. It's all. If you go up into New Hampshire, there's a Derry, there's a Londonderry. That's all. That's Ireland, but there's a Durham, there's a Dover, there's a Manchester. So you've got. I mean, where I'm from, that's everything. Everything is named after that.
New York, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
That's. I mean, I'm in Boston, so I don't go Sox. I don't go near Yankee territory, but yeah.
Yeah, they're in the World Series.
There's that was like New York used to be New Amsterdam, I think.
Yeah.
Dutch. Yeah, that was all Dutch.
Wow. Lots to wrap your head around. Lots to wrap your head around.
But I think too, I mean, we have Plymouth, right? We have Plymouth Rock. I think those people just came here, and when they, this was basically this, and I think Virginia was one of the other first.
Puritans, right? They wanted religious freedom. Religious
so
freedom.
When they came, they probably just named the area they were living in or the village like after the place that they came from, or where maybe their parents were from, or so it's Portsmouth, New Hampshire too. Hampton, New Hampshire. I mean, it's all those names. Reading, Mass. Right. Reading, England.
Reading, PA. Even through the Midwest, you have a lot of cities and towns named. Yeah. Wow.
Yep. And I think North Carolina is a lot of Scotland too, because I know a lot of Scottish settled there. Yep.
Well, we will try to keep this straight. But it's a good exercise, to look back at the past and see what you're dealing with and what has contributed to our present state, and the tentacles of the past still reach into the present to some degree, I suppose. But these people, this is just me talking. These people knocked each other off. I mean, they just. She doesn't believe that, but I do. I mean,
no.
I mean, so like all these different people had all these offspring of all these houses and stuff. They were in the royal court. That was like a royal welfare office, right? If you're such and such duke's son or cousin, you get a stipend and this and that and all that type of thing, huh?
Well, actually, a lot like I'm just going to use Henry VIII's wife as an example. We'll use Jane. So what actually happened was like Jane Seymour got lands gifted to her through her marriage. So how she supported herself with money was actually not through Henry just giving her money.
Yeah,
It
she
was
had her own.
the rents from the land. So I'm almost 1,000% positive that's exactly how they weren't getting money from the crown. They were getting money from the lands that they owned and the rents. And you have somebody that goes to collect all the rent from the people that live in the village, that work the farms and the fields, and that's how these dukes made their money.
So, spoiler alert, see all this stuff, all these wealthy nobles and aristocrats? In America, it got replaced. And you know who took over? Corporations and banks. Same song, different day.
Yeah, it's like that everywhere.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
well, this has been fun. Anything else? Give out your places where people can.
Oh
find
yeah,
you.
sure. So if you are on YouTube, you can head on over to my channel. It's Makeup and Monarchies, and subscribe. If you are on Instagram or TikTok or both, you can follow me under the same name at Makeup and Monarchies. And I do have I actually have a video coming out on my channel tomorrow. Tuesday the 22nd, I think it is tomorrow. And it's actually about medieval hair. So if no one's familiar, I'm a hairstylist. So I found that really intriguing to see how they took care of their hair and what they did with it. So they were coloring back then too. So I thought that was cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are my socials.
I'll have to check that out tomorrow. My stuff's all Medieval Chronicles 1066 YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So, and yeah, there you go.
All right.
I guess we'll catch everybody next Monday afternoon.
Yep.
And that's it. Say goodbye.
All right. Bye.
See ya.